Somewhere right now, someone is sitting in a waiting room, or a parking lot, or the quiet after a hard conversation, and underneath every other thought is one they haven't said out loud. Does God even see me? Not, does God exist? That's a different question. This one is smaller and more personal. It's the feeling that maybe he's real for everyone else, but somewhere along the way, you got missed. Researchers who study faith and mental health have found that this feeling, the sense that God is distant or simply gone, connects to depression and despair more than almost anything else in a person's spiritual life. This is not a rare experience. It's one of the most common things a person carries alone. And if you've spent any time in church, you already know what you're supposed to do with that feeling. Someone hands you Hebrews 13:5. God will never leave you nor forsake you. It's on bookmarks. It's on walls. It gets sent in text messages by people who love you and don't know what else to say. And if you've been honest with yourself, you know that reading the verse doesn't always make the feeling stop. Not because the verse is wrong, but because no one ever explained what's actually happening inside that silence, or what God does when his people feel like he's stopped showing up. That's what we're going to look at today. Not the theology of whether God is everywhere. Most people already believe that. But the lived experience of not feeling it, and what the Bible actually says about those seasons. There's a Hebrew word sitting inside Isaiah 49 that describes exactly what God is doing when he feels absent. And once you understand what that word means, the silence starts to look very different. Most people who know Isaiah 49 go straight to verses 15 and 16, and it makes sense why. God says, "Can a mother forget the baby she is nursing, the child she carried and gave birth to? Though she may forget, I will not forget you. I have engraved you on the palms of my hands." It's a powerful image. It's the kind of verse that gets underlined in Bibles and written on mirrors. But the verse that makes it land is the one right before it, verse 14. And most people read straight past it. That's where Israel speaks. Not a narrator, not a commentator standing outside the story. Israel itself, God's own people, says, "The Lord has forsaken me. The Lord has forgotten me." That's an accusation, spoken directly at God. And here's what stops me every time I read it. God doesn't correct the feeling. He doesn't say, "How dare you?" He doesn't hand them a list of reasons why they're wrong to feel that way. He answers the feeling, directly and specifically, which tells us something important about what this passage is actually for. This wasn't written for people who had everything figured out spiritually. It was written for people sitting inside the feeling. People for whom the silence had started to sound exactly like abandonment. That's the real diagnosis here. Not a faith that's too small. Not a prayer life that needs fixing. Just a season where the distance feels like it means something it might not mean. And that season, it turns out, has a very specific shape and a very specific response from God. To understand what God is actually saying in this passage, you have to look at one Hebrew word. It's the word both Israel and God use for forget. And once you see what it really means, the whole conversation changes. The word is shakash. It shows up over 100 times across the Old Testament, and its meaning goes deeper than the English word forget suggests. We forget things passively all the time. You forget where you put your phone. You forget someone's name the moment after they tell you. That kind of forgetting is accidental. It just happens. Shakach is different. At its root, it carries the idea of ceasing to care for something, of letting something drop out of your active attention and concern. When a farmer walks away from a field and stops tending it, that's shakash. When a king receives a request and sets it aside and never returns to it, that's shakash. It's not distraction. It's withdrawal. It's the active removal of care from something that once had your full attention. So when Israel cries out in verse 14, "The Lord has forgotten me," they are not saying God got busy and lost track. They are saying something much heavier than that. They are saying, He used to tend to us. He used to be present and active in our lives. And now it feels like He has walked away from the field, like He has set our petition down and moved on. That is an honest and painful thing to say. And it's the thing a lot of people feel but don't have words for. Now here is where the passage does something unexpected. God doesn't respond by saying that's impossible. Don't be ridiculous. He takes the feeling seriously, and then he answers it with a question and an image. He says, "Can a nursing mother forget the child at her breast? Can she stop feeling compassion for the baby she carried?" And then, and this is the turn, he says, "Even if she could, I could not do that to you." He doesn't stop there. He gives a reason, not a promise about how things will feel in the future. A physical image grounded in something concrete. He says, "I have engraved you on the palms of my hands." The Hebrew word for engraved there is chakak. It means to cut into a hard surface, to carve, to inscribe something permanently into stone or wood or skin. This is not a note written on paper that could be lost. This is not something that fades. The image God reaches for when he wants to describe how he holds you in his memory is a mark that had to be cut to exist. That changes the whole frame. God is not asking you to manufacture enough faith to believe he remembers you. He is pointing to something already done, already permanent. The evidence is not a feeling. It is a scar. And scars don't disappear when the season gets dark. God doesn't just make one argument in this passage. He builds a case. And the way he builds it matters, because each image he uses is more precise than the one before it. And together, they close off every exit the doubt in your mind might try to take. The first image is the nursing mother. And notice carefully what God does and doesn't say here. He doesn't say a mother never forgets her child. He says, even if she did. That's a deliberate move. He's not pretending that mothers are perfect or that human love never fails. He's granting the hardest possible case. What if even the most natural bond in the world broke down? And then he stakes his claim on the other side of it. His point isn't that motherly love is reliable. His point is that his connection to you is more deeply wired than the strongest biological bond that exists. Even if that breaks, he says, this doesn't. The second image shifts from emotion to structure. Engraved hands aren't a sentimental picture. Think about what it means to carve something into stone. An architect who cuts a city's plans into a hard surface isn't doing it to express a feeling. They're doing it because the work has to last, because people are going to build from it, because it needs to still be accurate and readable long after the cutting is done. That's the image God uses for how your name exists in his attention. Not a feeling that rises and falls, a working document he is actively building from. Every time God moves in the world, you are on the surface he is working with. The third image lands like a question no one in Israel was brave enough to ask out loud. In verse 24, God raises it himself. Can someone take back what a warrior has captured? Can a prisoner be pulled free from someone fierce enough to take them in the first place? The human answer is no. Obviously not. And God says, that is precisely what I am going to do. Which means the real question underneath this entire passage is the one fear keeps whispering, is my situation already too far gone? And God's answer isn't reassurance. It's a structural guarantee. You were never beyond his reach. The silence was never evidence that he had stopped. What Isaiah 49 describes is not a new problem. It didn't start with Israel in exile. Go further back, into the Psalms, and you find the same feeling written into the oldest prayers in the Bible. Not the polished ones, the raw ones. Psalm 88 is unlike almost any other chapter in the entire book. Most psalms that begin in darkness find their way to light by the final verse. There's a turn, a shift, a moment where the writer remembers who God is and lands somewhere steadier. Psalm 88 doesn't do that. It opens with a cry for help, and it ends with these words. Darkness is my closest friend. No resolution. No sunrise. The writer goes into the dark and stays there, at least on the page. The Hebrew word running through that psalm for what the writer is experiencing is azar, to be cut off, isolated, hemmed in on every side with nowhere to move. The psalmist describes himself as someone placed by God in the lowest pit, in the deepest dark. And here is the thing that should stop you for a moment. God kept that psalm. He didn't remove it from Scripture. He didn't smooth it out or add a hopeful ending. He preserved it exactly as it was written, which means the felt absence of God is not outside the Bible's understanding of faith. It is inside it. It belongs there. If you are in that place, you are not outside the story. You are on its pages. And here is the thread that connects all of it. Even in Psalm 88, at the bottom of the darkest chapter in the Psalter, the writer is still talking to God, still directing his words at the one he believes has gone quiet. That detail matters more than it might seem. Elijah did the same thing. One chapter after calling fire down from heaven, after one of the most dramatic moments in the entire Old Testament, he ran. He sat under a tree in the desert and asked God to let him die. And God's first response was not a correction. It was food and rest, then food again. And then, when God finally spoke, it wasn't in the wind or the earthquake or the fire. It was in what the Hebrew calls kol demama daka, the sound of thin silence, the whisper inside the quiet. God was never missing from Elijah's silence. It turns out he was already in it. So if the silence isn't absence, and the dark season isn't evidence that God has stopped, what do you actually do with it? Because knowing something theologically and knowing what to do with it on a Tuesday night, when the feeling is loudest, are two very different things. There's a Hebrew verb woven into Isaiah 49 that answers that question. It doesn't get as much attention as the images of the nursing mother or the engraved hands, but in some ways, it's the most practical thing in the entire passage. The word is kava. Most English translations render it as wait or hope. You've probably seen it in Isaiah 40:31. Those who wait upon the Lord will renew their strength. Same word. But the way we understand waiting in English doesn't quite carry what kava actually means. The root of the word is a rope. Specifically, the process of twisting separate strands together under tension to form something strong. That image is doing a lot of work, because waiting in the biblical sense was never meant to look like sitting in a chair doing nothing until something changes. It looks like a cord being pulled from both ends. Taut, under pressure, still connected, still holding. To quava toward God is to remain stretched in his direction when everything in you wants to go slack. It is staying in active tension with the expectation that he will act, even when you can't see movement yet. Not forcing an outcome, not manufacturing a feeling, just keeping the connection under tension instead of dropping it. Here is what that does to the problem. It reframes the silence completely. The silence is no longer a verdict. It is a season, and a season has an end built into it by definition. The rope is taut because there is something real on both ends. Your waiting is not empty. It is load-bearing. But this prescription needs to be honest about what it doesn't promise. It does not promise the silence ends quickly. It does not promise God will explain himself, or give you a timeline, or make the feeling of his presence return on your schedule. Kava is not a shortcut through the hard season. It is a posture you hold inside it. There is a difference between those two things. And collapsing that difference is how a lot of people end up more disappointed than before. What it does promise is this. The waiting itself is the faithfulness. You are not falling behind while you wait. You are not failing while you hold on in the dark. The God whose name is carved into permanent surfaces has not glanced away from whatever situation currently has your name on it. So here is something concrete. The next time the silence rises and starts to sound like abandonment, not someday, tonight if that's when it comes, say it out loud. Say, I don't feel you right now, but I am not letting go of the rope. That is kava in real time. That is what staying looks like when staying costs something. There's a woman named Rachel. She's 41, a hospice nurse, and she has had real faith for 12 years, the kind that's been tested enough to feel solid. She's also the person in her circle that everyone else calls when life gets heavy. She knows how to sit with hard things. It's literally her job. She prayed for her father every day for 3 years while he moved slowly through a terminal illness. She was there the morning he died. She held his hand. She said everything she needed to say. And then she got in her car and drove home. And somewhere on that drive she felt something she had never felt before in her adult life. Not anger at God, something quieter. and harder than that. Emptied, like the thing she had been holding on to had gone still. She kept showing up, church on Sundays, prayer in the mornings, but she told her pastor months later that it had started to feel like talking into a room she wasn't sure had anyone in it. Her pastor didn't give her a list of things to do. He opened his Bible to Isaiah 49 and pointed to verse 14. He said, "Read what Israel said first." She read it, and she sat with it for a long time without saying anything. What shifted in her didn't happen all at once. It was gradual, the way feeling comes back into a hand that's been cold. She stopped trying to produce the feeling of God's presence and started resting in the evidence of his attention. She wrote the words engraved on the palms of his hands on a note card and put it on her dashboard, not as a feeling to reach for, as a fact to come back to. 6 months later, she told her pastor, "I don't know when exactly the silence changed, but I noticed one day that I had stopped asking if he was there and started talking to him like I already knew he was. That's not a sudden breakthrough. That's a rope that held." There's a thread running through everything we've looked at today, and I don't want you to miss it before we close. The same God who kept Psalm 88 in his holy book, the one that ends in darkness with no resolution, is the God who met Elijah in the desert after the greatest victory of his life and gave him food and rest before he gave him words. The same God who answered Israel's accusation of abandonment, not with a rebuke, but with an image cut into skin. That God is not caught off guard by your dark season. He is not standing at a distance waiting for you to feel better before he steps back in. He has been responding to the feeling of forsakenness for thousands of years, and the answer has never changed. I have not stopped. You are still on my hands. That's not a sentiment. It's a structural reality that existed before you entered the silence and will still be true when you come out the other side of it. And here is what God is not asking you to do with that. He is not asking you to pretend the silence feels fine. He is not asking you to manufacture warmth you don't feel, or to perform a closeness that isn't there yet. He is not asking you to rush yourself through a season that has its own weight and its own pace. What he is asking is both simpler and harder than any of that. Don't let the silence have the final word. Stay in the tension. Keep hold of the rope, the kava, the staying, the remaining stretched toward him when everything feels still. That is the faithfulness, not the feeling. The feeling may come and go. The holding is what counts. Rachel didn't feel her way back to God. She held on in the dark until the day she noticed she was talking to him again, like she knew he was there. Elijah didn't reason his way out of the desert. He ate, he rested, and he listened for the thin silence until something moved. Israel didn't resolve their accusation with a better theology. God answered it with a picture of his own hands. The pattern is the same every time. Bring the honest feeling. Stay in the tension. Trust the evidence over the experience. And let the God who carves rather than writes hold what you cannot carry right now. If something in this reached you today, would you share it with one person who might be in that silent season right now? Not as a debate or a lesson, just as something that might land where a short verse on a bookmark hasn't been able to. And if you want to keep going deeper into what the text actually says beneath the surface, subscribe. We do this every week, because some of us need more than a quote. We need to understand what it means, and that's exactly what we're here for. God bless you. See you in our next video.